Welcome to the Going North podcast, where you will be encouraged, informed, and empowered to embrace your dreams and advance in life through authorship. I'm your host, bestselling author, certified leadership trainer, and book enthusiast Dom Brightman. Be sure to check out the goods and services from every guest, as well as some of the books from yours truly, the host. Now let the fun begin. And today on the Going North podcast, where we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today is no different. Heck, who am I kidding? Today is different because today we got a 2-for-1 special, my friends. A 2-for-1 special because, my goodness, we have a grandfather-grandson duo on this show. A first time ever. And to be honest, I think this is the first time really heard of a grandfather and actually grandson actually writing a book together. And this is going to be one heck of a powerful interview because the grandfather himself is a New York Times bestselling author, lecturer, and founder of ECAP, the Exceptional Cancer Patients, and is a retired pediatric general surgeon and has been called a leading teacher of the mind-body connection, as well as other awesome things. And the grandson himself is a spiritual fiction author and poet, as well as a fine art nature photographer who studied martial arts for 20 plus years. So let's give it up for the legends themselves, Bernie Siegel and his grandson, Charlie Siegel. How are you doing today, folks?
Thank you. I'm always saying, don't ask me how I'm doing. Say, you're looking very well today. And it gets quite a reaction when I do this in our town, because the old time employees, when I walk into a store, say, you're looking very well today. And when a new employee says, how are you doing? I say, stop aggravating me and bringing up all my troubles. And everybody in the store looks at me like, why don't you see a psychiatrist? But when an old timer comes in and says, you're looking well today, the whole store bursts out laughing. They realize it's, a gimmick I've worked out. And then, it's the laughter. Then we're all family. And I found that in the hospital, in the operating room. I've told you I never stop talking, but one more story about the operating room so you understand the benefit of humor and why Charlie and I really came together. A woman was in a panic about her surgery, and I was afraid to take her in the operating room that she'd have a heart attack or something. But after 45 minutes of standing in the hallway trying to calm her down, I knew this is not going to work, so I might as well go in. So we wheel her in, and she sits up on the stretcher and says, thank God, all these wonderful people are going to take care of me. And I thought, if I agree with her, what the hell is that going to accomplish? So I said loud enough for everybody in the operating room to hear, look, I've worked with these people for years. They are not wonderful people. And for a moment, I thought she was going to run down the hall. But then all the nurses, anesthesiologists, they know Crazy Siegel. So they busted out laughing, and she started laughing with them. And then we became family. That was the thing that impressed me. When you laugh together, it's like you're a family, and there's a bonding. And so those are the kinds of things I would do to bring people together. The fears don't unite them. I mean, they may have the same experience. I'm afraid of having this. I'm afraid I could die. I'm afraid. But you don't bond together when everybody's afraid. But when you're loving and laughing, you're a family.
Amen to that. Amen to that. The doc is dropping wisdom already. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So this is probably a novelty that rarely happens, and I haven't heard before of an actual grandfather and grandson coming together to put out a book, let alone a poetry book at that. So what led to that?
Well, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. We both written our poetry in our own lives for quite a while. A lot of his poetry he wrote like back in the 80s and was in his journal, his personal journal. And then my poetry, I started in like 2013 or so, and I've been writing poetry ever since. And it's for me, I'm writing my poetry to share a lot of spiritual teachings and healing messages and stuff that I've been grateful to learn in my life. And the sort of the notion for the poem and the inspirational idea just pops into my head. Sometimes it's when I'm out taking pictures, I'll see something in nature that speaks to being written down in a poem, or other times it sort of appears in me. And then the poem kind of unravels and happens as I start to write. So I started to collect a good deal of poems that I had written, and he and I started sharing them back and forth over emails and talking about them. And as we read each other's work, there were so many similarities when we had written them separately, but it was like we were having a conversation while writing them, like a subconscious conversation. So our book just kind of happened as we lined up our poems, and there was really a conversation happening between us that, like, well, we should get this out there so people can get to enjoy it. And there's a lot of different topics about life with destiny and relationships, and the idea of an inner light in us. There's a Hello God chapter, lots of spiritual teachings that we wanted to get to share with people.
Yeah, when I mentioned I had another book, and I was talking to Charlie about some of the spiritual things in it and looking for, his advice and things that he had done, because I know he's not a normal person. And out of that conversation, he's mentioning his poetry. I said, oh, I've done poetry. So we're emailing it up and back, and it's like, hey, it's like almost we're looking in the mirror and I'm seeing you, you're seeing me. It's like we're the same persons. And I really feel that Charlie's about 30 years ahead of what most people are. That the point that he's at in his life took me a lot longer to get to, through the pain of being a surgeon. Why is there so much trouble in the world? Why didn't God make us all healthy instead of with diseases, or the coronavirus? I mean, why would God create things like that? But Charlie, in his poetry, and myself dealing with my pain, we're like the same person in the sense of willingness to feel it and to become creative out of it. And Charlie was into photography. I'm into painting, portrait painting. And again, we're both visual persons as well. And I think that affects our mind. But at the same time, here we are also writing, because we're coming from our heart now. I often tell people the only C I got in 4 years of college was in creative writing. And I remember William Saroyan, in a story of his, he says to a writer, tells his assistant, you're quite a writer too. What do you mean? I've never written anything. Oh, the letter to your father on your desk. I read it. That's just a letter to my father. And that helped me learn to be a writer, because I used to write enormous numbers of letters trying to support people with life-threatening illnesses before computers were available. And I realized I never had trouble writing a letter and helping people. It just flowed out of me. And I think that's ultimately what I struggled with by keeping journals. The pain I would write about in my book and hide it. And my wife found it and told me there was nothing funny in it. So again, I began to add the good things in my life. And having 5 children, they're critics also. And I don't mean that you're a terrible father, but yeah, one of their expressions was, I never forget, if they didn't like how I was behaving, they say, Dad, what is it? You're not in the operating room now. You're not the chief. And so again, it wasn't criticizing me. It was making me look at how I was behaving. And I have to add, for my sense of humor, when you have 5 children, do you know why your mother and I will never get a divorce? Why not, Dad? Because neither one of us wants the children. And they would immediately quiet down, knowing, uh-oh, he's reached that point again, so we better behave.
Oh man, too funny.
But, we really connected. That's all I can say. It's like we're talking to ourselves, spiritual, mystical, practical. And so the book evolved. And as I say, as Charlie said, when I sent him my poetry, it's like we're writing the same poems because it's about life. You know, we're both looking at it. And I have to keep repeating, I admire him incredibly because at his age, to be open to all of this and the feelings and everything else. So it was such a pleasure and a resource. You know, it's like finding an oasis in the desert. I mean, he supplies me with the water. You know, it was just wonderful.
I commend a lot of it to that. I grew up in my mom's spiritual store, Wisdom of the Ages, in Simsbury, Connecticut. She started it when I was 3 years old, and I was homeschooled, so I did a lot of my schoolwork in the back of the store. And when she'd teach like meditation classes and like advanced spiritual development classes and all different kinds of things, I would just be building Legos and coloring and listening in. And I've always been a part of the store that way, and now I manage it alongside her. But I've grown up with that. It's like traditional spirituality and helping people in a heart kind of way, working through their things in their lives and coming to a more peaceful place where they can be their best selves. That's been my whole life, being involved in that. So my writing and my photography have become like my own facet of the same practice and my own way of wanting to help people. And I've always written stories and stuff just for fun. But it was like coming out of high school, I was like, this is what I really want to do with writing spiritual fiction and poetry and giving people things to think about that'll help to grow their perspective into a more positive direction. And having a grandfather that's a best-selling author that's helped people around the world is definitely an inspiration. So this is a really nice thing to get to share in this project together.
You know, one of his most important sentences, these are the things I really wanted to do. And he did them. And that's why I admired the homeschooling, because most kids growing up aren't allowed to do all the things they really wanted to do. Parents, well, even the Bible talks about he who seeks to save his life will lose it, but he who's willing to lose his life will save it. What are they talking about? You know, when your parents impose a life on you, then you've lost your life. So whether you become a lawyer, running your father's business when he retires, or whatever it is, or what your mother wanted to be proud of you. And Charlie didn't say that. He said he was doing what made him happy. He saved his life. And the way I see it is so many adults who, when they're told they're going to die of a disease, save their life. And I mean it both physically and emotionally, because then they quit what's killing them and start a new life, new profession, moving. I mean, I could tell you a million stories, but from buying a house on the ocean to going to Colorado to die in the mountains to getting a dog. Yeah, one woman, that impressed me too, what our mind does to our body. She'd had polio as a child, developed a neurological disease, paralyzing her gradually. And she said, I didn't want to die hating my body, because she'd always hated the deformity from polio. And so she said, I decided that I would take off all my clothes, lie naked in front of a mirror, and love my body. She said, I started at the toes and worked my way up inch by inch, sending my love to all the parts of my body. And what ended up happening, her disease went into remission, and she became cured from loving her body. And these are the people I keep admiring, not just because they got well, but because of what they did. Another I thought about, I called her up, I said, what's happening? Was your house robbed? She said, what are you talking about? You sent me a picture of yourself. You're gagged, you're tied in a chair. I mean, what's going on in your house? And she said, you know, I'm paralyzed, so I wanted to type my autobiography with my nose. And so they tied me in a chair, put a gag on so I wouldn't drool on the keys of the computer. And boy, when I read that, those are the people who are my teachers. Boy, do I admire them. You know, with all those disabilities, she's typing out her life story. And you can't help but admire those people. And again, do a lot of them do far better than everybody expects? Yeah, because they're again acting out of love and giving their body a very different message. So they never end up dying when the doctor tells them they will. A lot of them end up outliving the doctors because of what their body, the message their body is getting, versus what it gets on Monday morning when we have more of every kind of illness, when people hate going to work.
Powerful right there. Powerful right there. So many things to unpack with the stories. One of the biggest things I love to, especially what you mentioned, Bernie, is how you actually got a C in creative writing class, but you're actually inspired to become a writer and keep writing after being told after someone read your letters that to your father that hey, that's a
Right.
good writing. Like, dude, that is something that everybody should be reminded of. Like, hey, if you write as if you're writing a letter to a friend or a loving family member, then that's the way to write.
You're writing from your heart. That's a good way to do it. I can read a few pieces from our book if you'd like to
I
talk
was just
about
going to
what's in
say, Charlie,
there.
every time I open this book, it's like Charlie wrote a poem. It's entitled Footprints. I wrote a poem too. Let me just say this, Charlie, then you read
Yeah,
something, all right?
yeah, go ahead.
Because I literally was jogging in the winter and running through the snow. And then a few days later, I realized you're going to break your ankle because the ground had frozen over. So trying to fit in my same steps didn't work. If I missed by an inch, I was in big trouble. And it made me end up writing something about footsteps and about God. That there are footsteps ahead of me, and I know which way to go and where to step. And then there are other days where God says, Bernie, you got to do this by yourself today and find your way and find a path, a new path. And I think those are things that really struck me because, again, when we shared our poems, it's like, wow, look what I wrote. Look what you wrote. We're seeing the world in a similar way. Go ahead, Charlie, find
Yeah.
something.
There's a few poems that we've even written and put the same title on without knowing each other had written a poem on the same topic even. So it's pretty cool stuff throughout the book. We lined them all up like a conversation together into 7 different sections. So we picked the title of our book, When You Realize How Perfect Everything Is. It's based off of an anonymous quote. When you realize how perfect everything is, you'll tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. And it deals with, it's kind of like a spiritual concept of the way of looking at the world, that when you look at life experiences, I think of it like if you were to look from a bird's eye view, you at your own life's path and the way it connects with other people's paths, those times that seem imperfect, that are more difficult and challenging, you depends on how you respond to them. If they make you stronger and you respond to them in a way that you feel like you learned a lesson from that and you became like a more peaceful or a stronger person or however you would grow, then that really was perfect that it happened to you because it made you grow and it gave you an opportunity to grow in the best way for you. There's one of my poems. Some of these poems in the book are like classical poetry. Some of them are more like very short poetic writings and like mini short stories that alternate or work through it. So one of mine is called The Encounter, and it talks about that kind of feeling that I was just mentioning. It's one guy says, I'm looking at the stillness, he said, as I came up beside him. He was gazing out across the busy street as he stood there, as still as the morning's hush. What do you mean? I see only the bustle of the city. My eyes sped quickly over the scene where so many moved as if attempting the speed of flight. But watch from where the bird flies, he whispered, far up above the noise, higher up than your eyes will let you see the motion where all you can see is stillness. I listened to him in astonishment. How are you looking at that from down here? Because I'm looking with my heart. His eyes flashed and the mist of the morning hung around him. And then we have one of Grandpa Bernie's later on in the book that it's that kind of feeling of noticing the beauty in each other and that perfection in life that sometimes it's evident when you notice like beauty in nature and things around us. And one of our chapters is Nature, Our Teacher, all about how nature has lessons in there for us. But sometimes we see it in the imperfections are really what's the most beautiful thing. His poem, Have a Safe Trip, is I am packed and heading for the airport. I leave my hotel room. Have a safe trip. The housekeeper calls after me as I walk to the elevator carrying my luggage. It's so nice of God to appear in various disguises. I smile. I feel safe on my journey. An angel just blessed me. I guess God really isn't in disguise. I've met an angel and didn't recognize her or stop to get her autograph. Next time I meet God or an angel, I'm going to stop and get an autographed picture. But if I play my part correctly, I suppose looking in the mirror will do. That's one of my favorites of yours.
Thank you. There are a lot of people who said to me, they don't rhyme. What do you call them poetry for? I said, I'm not trying to make it rhyme. That's not the point. I'm trying to put forth a message. And I'd say that's the same with Charlie. You know, it's the message in the words and what they connect you with. And that's why I think this is a time people need to read these things and write their own poetry. You know, this is just the end of one of Charlie's poems. Where are you? Said the caterpillar. Right here, said the butterfly inside of him. Where am I? Said I. Right here, said my soul from inside my heart. Wow. And the symbol in Solzhenitsyn's book Cancer Ward, he discusses self-induced healing, a term you never hear from doctors. If you get well and you're not supposed to, you're lucky, or you had a spontaneous remission. But I've learned it is self-induced. And the symbol, a rainbow-colored butterfly.
Mm,
And
nice.
again, the struggle to get out of the cocoon, the transformation, and what's the rainbow about? Your life in order. And that's what I think we have helped achieve for ourselves. And I'm not saying we're perfect in that sense, but it's, again, the struggle to get out, to find that harmony and to create it. And it's the same theme I said before. You know, you want to save your life, find that harmony. And then how perfect everything is, because everything's where it belongs. And you can also have what I call spiritual flat tires. A curse becomes a blessing. You know, it's, if the flat tire delays your arriving at the airport, and when you do arrive and say, where's my plane? They say, oh, it took off and crashed. Oh, thank God I had a flat tire on the way here. So I grew up with that. And again, Charlie said it also, sitting in the store, you know, with spiritual environment. And my parents were like that. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. I didn't like that as a child because I thought I had troubles. And when I would share them with my mother, she'd say, it was meant to be. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. My reaction was, why don't I have a mother who can help me? But she connected me with, again, no coincidences. Who knows the future? Let's see what's going to happen. And yeah, I don't know whether it's in one of the books I just wrote. I remember applying to Harvard so that if I got in there, I'd impress everybody. And my principal said, that is not where you ought to go. You know, that you're not a socially active young man, because I had skipped a couple of years. So I was ahead of my grade. And he said, why don't you go to Colgate, where he had gone, upstate New York, all boys. He knew I was not going to get into trouble there, where what would have happened to me up in Massachusetts and at a big school and co-ed and everything else. So again, a lot of good things happened. And I ended up winning a scholarship, because if you were living in New York and went to a school in New York and had the highest score on this test that everybody could take, I got a scholarship to both the college and medical school because I stayed in New York. But again, would I have planned all that? No, I would have tried to impress people, you know, and gone to Harvard. But I realized later it was not the right thing. So again, whether it's reading our books or listening to your heart, um, pay attention and help somebody find your path for you. And that's something we've written about in there, about paths and ways and everything else.
That's right. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. And for those who may be having that trouble finding, well, not finding, but following their heart when it comes to decision making in certain things, what advice would you give to them?
About making the right decision?
Yes, indeed.
Well, that was the second thing my mother said to me. After God is redirecting you, I have to make a decision. What should I do? Do what makes you happy. Boom. And I think even with the homeschooling, if somebody had said to me, what do you think of your grandson being homeschooled? I'd say, I don't think that's a good idea. I think he should be at school, with other children and this and that. But believe me, he's made me a believer in it. It's how things are done and the emotion behind it, and the meaning in it. And look what it has created. Yeah, he impresses me. And I have other grandchildren too who have gone to colleges and, bright, and they're wonderful too. But it's getting that kind of freedom and that surrounding that lets you be yourself. That's the most important. Because when parents impose things on their children, they're taking their lives away. In one study, 70% of high school students said, I have contemplated suicide. There's a wonderful line, well, it's not really wonderful, but in East of Eden by John Steinbeck, almost all of us experience rejection. With rejection comes a desire for revenge. With revenge, guilt. And there is the story of mankind. And when you think of all our headlines and what we're doing to each other and all the killings on the streets, you realize that that is really coming out of your childhood. One of our kids, oh boy, more stories pop into my head. He's an FBI agent. I have to step aside for a minute to tell you this, because I bought a hat there that you're not supposed to, that says FBI on it. It's like a baseball cap. He told me I shouldn't have done that and not to wear it. You don't know, somebody could shoot you. But whenever I wear it on the street, you see, I meet healthy people too, because they'll walk up to me and say, what are you, a full-blooded Italian? What are you, a female body investigator? And then I've met other people who have no sense of humor, because I was walking our dogs and I didn't realize I had that cap on. And it's a gardening section in our town. And I walked past a couple who were working in the garden. I said, hey, we're here to sniff for, marijuana. This was years ago. And I didn't realize I had that FBI hat on. I was kidding around. And they went into a panic, shrieking and yelling, no, we don't, no, that. And then I realized, dumbbell, you have that hat on. They think you really mean it. So I felt so terrible and apologized to them. But I don't do that anymore. I wrote one poem called The Wrong Turn. On the other side of the page is one by Charlie called The Door. I made the wrong turn on the parkway. There was no sign or symptom to guide me, and I didn't ask for directions. I had to reverse myself. It was hard, but I did. I took a deep breath, let God take the wheel, and everything went in the right direction. God has had her driver's license longer than I have. I didn't think I missed anything, but who knows what the good Lord wanted me to miss, that I am better off not running into. I guess I took the right turn and learned how to turn things around. Thank God. And who knows if it's a wrong turn, like the flat tire. I've even run into a car whose license plate was, I'm lost, when I was lost. And I pulled over and got them to help me find, give me directions as to where I was supposed to go. But that's the only time in my life I've ever seen a license plate that said, I'm lost. Yeah.
Part of our chapter in the book on destiny, it teaches about that destiny is what you want to make it, and that following your heart and doing what makes you happy. And it's sometimes it is listening to
Yeah.
your heart and then deciding, like my mom always says, like decide how much people's opinions matter, and you might have like a handful of people in your lives whose their opinion really matters to you and you can use it to help you make decisions, and then other people you kind of work through what they said and brush it off, and that they don't really know what you feel and what's right for you. But the part of that path, like he was talking about, you don't know what's the right turn and what's the wrong turn. You just keep moving in what feels right. One of my poems in our destiny chapter, it actually opens the book. It's called Truth, Love, and Light. And it follows that message. And it says, what if everything is predetermined to be undetermined? What if the universe has a plan for you to be yourself? What would you do if you were handcrafted out of stardust to be the best person you could be? With the blessings of the universe who autographed its creation with the twinkles in your eyes, may you go forth and be someone you love.
And on one of his calendars, I keep this on my desk, Charlie has, my candle burns, not to dispel the darkness, but to put forth the truth. And I think that's what we're trying to let people know about. Got to read you one more of mine, because it's again about direction, the destiny. Which way? What should I do when I have a choice? Which fork in the road do I follow? Follow the right fork by taking them both. They are the beginning of a circle you cannot see. All roads lead to the same place. They bring you home. Like a river which flows to the sea, they bring you home, completing the circle of life. And when I read some of my own poems, I don't know how I managed, but you get into a place in your life, it's like a trance, and something flows out of you, out of your consciousness. And that's why connecting with Charlie was just such a gift for me. And that's why I say, how could we, in a sense, not connect? It's like meeting yourself, that when you've had that, I don't want to use the word wisdom in the sense of people thinking of it, who's smarter and who's dumber, but let's just say experience. When you've had that kind of life experience, then you are aware of things like this and write about them. And so again, you can see why we connected when I started talking to him about the other book and all the stuff that poured out of us and came together.
My photography illustrates our book too. That our cover of When You Realize How Perfect Everything Is, it has a hawk flying through a sunset sky that I took on top of a mountain. There was a hawk flying right next to the mountaintop. And my photography illustrates all through the book. So there's 4 photos in each chapter. And when I started writing poetry more professionally, I started printing it right on top of my pictures. And I sell poetry photo prints, like laminated or framed, for people to have up on the wall. And started to get such a collection of those that we put them together into this book. But I picked out a lot of those photographs to be able to illustrate it. And there's pictures from the US, from Iceland, from Japan. And we suggest to people a lot to just go out and be in nature and feel your connection with that. They've done some great studies that I think it's an hour and a half in nature. It changes the blood flow in your brain so that it doesn't strengthen or give as much blood flow to the part of your head responsible for negative thinking. So it makes you think more positively. And for me, being out in nature reminds you that you're connected with everything around you in the world. You're a piece of that puzzle of life. And that idea of like, it's not just you out there. When you're out in nature, you're a piece of all of that. That's something good for us all to remember. That can really.
I found a word in a journal that I am rereading every day from 1996. One of the things where all this poetry came out of, all my pains and thoughts and emotions every day. And it's fascinating, from 1996. And I'm relearning. Well, and I may mention, I have a book called 365 Prescriptions for the Soul. And I've been reading that for years. And you say, you wrote it, what do you need to read? It reawakens you. Every day you're reading another message and remembering it. Because we don't, consciously remember every damn thing that happened to us 10 years ago. But when you pick up the journal and look at it, what a difference it makes to bring that forth and bring it back to you. And that's why, when I mentioned about the bird, I said to Charlie, we should have two birds on it, the grandfather and grandson. And that's when he said, it's about the reader. They're finding their path and their way. And that woke me up too, to thinking about it in that way, that we're trying to guide others. There's no question about it. And it's hard to flip pages without wanting to stop and start reading, what's in front of me, because you just learn and relearn from your own words and wisdom.
I'm really grateful to have grown up with all the spiritual teachings that I have, and I've gotten to be around and continue to learn. On the back of my book, I call myself an eternal student in my mini biography on the back. That's part of my idea here, that my other grandfather on my mom's side always said, you want to be learning until the day you die, that you're learning through your whole life. We're all on this path of life together. And for me, getting to write is I want to share those lessons that I've gotten to learn along the way. And sometimes it's things that just sort of come to me, like there's a poem in there that I wrote about stirring coffee. And it takes something simple like that we see in life. And there's so many metaphors and lessons in there that we can connect to. There's teachings for us all around us. And I like it a lot when we write original things. And then there's like ancient wisdom that's part of that. I have a quote from Rumi up here in my office that says, God picks up the reed flute world and blows. Each note is a need coming through one of us, a passion, a longing pain. Remember the lips where the wind breath originated and let your note be clear. Don't try to end it, be your note. That's a lot of what we were talking about with being yourself and following your heart. And it's sometimes we're putting it into new words or descriptions to continue to pass it along for different generations of people. But there's this wisdom that we sort of click into, I feel like, that carries on throughout the world.
And the reason the writing, that's why I recommend everybody write poetry, because when you get yourself into that quiet state, that's where you need to be. And it's hard to quiet your mind and to get to that place so that you then know what is true. The symbolism, something I learned from something practical. I met a young lady named Amelia Kincaid, who wrote a book, Straight from the Horse's Mouth. It's about animal communication. Because when I met her in an elevator at an ASPCA meeting, we were in the hotel, get on the elevator. I said to her, hi, why are you here? Oh, I'm an animal intuitive. I said, what's that? I talk to animals. And I thought, lady, why don't you just say you're nuts? I mean, how can you talk to animals? But I have an open mind and test people. A few months later, one of our pets disappeared. And we're in a very wooded area. I figured it's dead, caught by some animal. But I emailed Amelia, who was in California, and I said, can you tell me what happened to this cat? And within about 24 hours, I got a complete description of an area outside our house and the fact that the cat is alive, because these are her words. I can see the moon through its eyes, so I know the cat's alive, but it's under the house. I thought, what are you talking about? It's under a house. The cat ended up being under a stairway off the house. She put herself in a cage, let's put it that way, outside, so she was safe there. No other creature could squeeze in as she did. And the next day, when I was screaming her name, I heard her cry out and saw she was under the stairs and got her out and brought her back in the house. And once when she was in Africa, Amelia told me where to find a lost cat also. And she was correct again and described the room. I mean, she said, it must be in the garage. It's full of junk and all. I said, that's our basement with 5 kids. It's there, it's papers and junk. And I thought the cat was there, but she never came out when I called her. But once I knew, we got her out. And the reason that made a big difference to me was then noticing something Joseph Campbell wrote where a tiger dies giving birth while she was chasing some goats. And the goats raise the kid. They decide, let's raise the baby, don't let it die. That's why I admire animals. You know, I think most people would say, just let that kid, look what his, mother did, so let him die. So they raise it and he thinks he's a goat until another tiger comes and says, hey, stupid, you're not a goat, you're a tiger, come with me. And he takes him to a still pond. And he says, look, you're a tiger, you're not a goat. And in The Ugly Duckling, where is the duckling? When he's on a still pond, he sees that he's a swan. And why can he do that? Because he's not like that line from East of Eden, rejection and revenge. He's rejected by his mother, thrown out of the house, but he's not living that hating life, wanting to get even and get revenge. So when he looks down in the water, he's not cursing his mother. He's seeing, I'm a swan. I'm a swan too. And that's what we all need to do. And I hope this book could give you that. Peace of mind, a quiet mind, that you begin to realize you have everything. And that's the best way of thinking about that title. When you realize how perfect everything is, we have what we need, but we need to quiet our mind in order to see that. And I've been very impressed when I quiet my mind, how I communicate with our animals and get them to come home when they've snuck out of the house, and ask them if they want to take a walk in my head, and they answer me. I have to tell you this story. I wrote a little book called Buddy's Candle. And I went out of the house the day after I finished it, and a voice said to me, and I hear voices all the time, and I'm not schizophrenic, but anyway, I hear the voice say, go to the animal shelter. I go down there, walk in, there's a dog sitting there. I said, what's his name? Well, his name is Buddy. He's been here less than 15 minutes. I said, I'm here to take him home. On the way home, I stopped for gas and the dog jumped out of the car. And it took half an hour to quiet down the traffic, tell other people, he doesn't know me. It's not my dog. I just brought him home from the shelter. So we finally corralled him, put him back in the car. And when I got home, I lived Amelia's message. I quieted my mind while he was still in the car. And I said, why did you do that? And I couldn't believe what I heard in my head. I belonged to a couple. The wife was very nice. The husband was an alcoholic. And when the wife would say, go take the dog for a walk when he came home from work, he would put me in the car and go to a bar and drink and leave me locked in the car. And then when he came out drunk, he'd abuse me. I never want to be in a car. I said, I would never treat you that way. I love you. I brought you here to love you. And I could see how true that story was, because I couldn't believe I'm hearing this in my head. Because in the kitchen, I offer a pet a treat. I'd say, come here. He backed up. Anytime you said, come here, he went the other way. And I knew he was so used to being abused. If I picked up a stick, he would cringe, oh, he's going to beat me. But eventually he learned I loved him. And one day I went shopping, came back to the car, and the side door was open. And I realized I had hit the button on the minivan when I put keys in my pocket, and automatically opened the door. And as I'm walking towards the car, I thought, well, he's gone. That's the end of him. He was sitting in an open car waiting for me. My other dog, I have to tell you, he always went everywhere with me, and I could go into stores and leave him outside in the street and know he'd be there when I came out. And I quieted my mind instead of screaming, realized he's in Stop and Shop looking for me. So I went into Stop and Shop, and the security guard said, yeah, I have a dog. You looking for a dog? And there he was looking for me. But that's, to me, the beauty of life. And if we can connect with others who have a quiet mind with this poetry, it'll make a big change in their lives too, and a gift to us.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about right there. All the wisdom beyond generations. So for heck, this might be a Charlie question is for those who may be on the younger side of the game chronologically and they probably need to improve their communication skills with the elderly and absorbing their wisdom to be able to share with others. What's probably your advice to millennials, Gen Z, and all the younger folks who may dismiss the wiser folks who've been on the planet longer but still have wisdom to share from your experience?
I think being in your heart is important. It's easy in 2020 life or at times like this to get up in your head and to get just busy with technology and work and all those kind of things. But like I've grown up meditating really regularly, and to get into that quiet space within yourself is important. And when you're coming from a heart space and you're connected with more of a quiet space inside yourself, you start to recognize that beauty and that wisdom in other people. And that idea of being an eternal student, knowing that you might know a lot at this point, but there's other things to learn forever. And when like kind of like you don't have it all figured out ever, and that's a good thing to think about. I'm a martial arts practitioner and teacher also, and there's a concept called shugyo from Japanese training that talks about like eternally polishing and eternally working to better yourself. So sometimes you might meet somebody of any age that has wisdom in there that's meant for you to connect with, and you might have something for them. Like our book that we've written together, we're both sharing different messages and having a conversation together, and sometimes we're learning things from each other in the process. So to always stay open to that, keep that readiness to learn and that desire to like always polish, always get better. That's a good way to be.
Let me read a poem Charlie wrote. Reminds me of something. The rainbow. Look out the window. Rain batters the glass. All the beauty has been covered by a swirling storm. The clouds have smudged the blue of the sky. The rain makes it hard to see the flowers across the pond. But there is a rainbow filling the sky above your head. What will you focus on? Why I feel that we are so connected. One morning I walked into our bathroom and there had been a rain and ice storm the night before. So the entire window was covered with ice. I couldn't see the thermometer. I couldn't see the weather. And I have to get to the operating room. I don't know, what's going on out there. And I was angry at the weather, the window, and it was making my day a mess. How can I figure things out? And then I noticed something, that the window looked like, what should I say, crystals. Suddenly it became absolutely incredibly beautiful. It was designed. Everyone was fit in. It wasn't just a flat nothing. It was all these crystals of ice. And a little bit of light came out in the sky, and that window was incredible. And I'm wondering if I have a camera to take photographs of it, and I'm falling in love with it. And I felt the change in me. Suddenly it isn't, will you be late to the OR? What do you need to, how do you need to get dressed? What's the weather like outside? How much time do you need to drive to the hospital? Suddenly it was just gratitude for this gift from God of this beautiful window. And that's, again, what I feel is in the two of us. We keep finding this, and what we focus on. My poem, Happiness, across from his rainbow. I will not give my power away. It is my happiness, mine. I create it, not you. I decide to be, not you. You can come into my happiness, but you cannot create it or destroy it. You can only enlarge it. And I'll tell you, as a doctor in a physical sense, I began to study years ago concentration camp survivors and what they wrote about because I was trying to teach people how to survive. And one physician, I found an article, he couldn't believe what he saw happening because they were told when they were put in the concentration camp, if you can't work, we don't feed you or we just put a bullet to your head. And he said patients with every disease, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, those who had that will to live, people that he expected to die in short order because there's no medications, no treatments, when they had that will to live, they didn't end up in the infirmary where you just lay there and weren't fed and died. And so he wrote an article eventually when the war was over for a medical journal to talk about that will to live and what a difference it made in people. And I think, again, that's part of, why Charlie and I came together, the will to live, to see the perfection rather than complain about the things that are wrong and, what's happening. Because they always say, if your car won't start, who knows what the person who comes to fix it will tell you. It may end up being a gift that somebody needed to come and help you get your car started because of what you talk about and what you share. Oh yeah, I may have said this on another interview. I was driving straight ahead on a very windy back hill road in upstate New York because my wife was asleep. And if I followed the road, she would bang against the window, fall over into the middle of the car. So I just went straight ahead because there were no other cars. And a cop shows up and pulls me over. What are you, drunk, on drugs? What's the matter with you, the way you're driving? I said, no, it's just my wife. She's bouncing around if I follow the road. So I went straight. He said, give me your driver's license. So I hand it to him. He reads it. Then he says, are you Dr. Siegel? I said, yes. Oh, my mother loves you. And there was no ticket involved in that one. But he and I had a therapy session. And again, no coincidence. Look who stops me. My mother loves you. And we had a wonderful time sitting in the road talking to each other. So those are the kinds of things that happen. And I just say, follow your heart and magic. Yeah, that was by somebody with AIDS years ago I was helping who went from HIV positive to negative with no treatment. And she said, I put on my refrigerator, when you live in your heart, magic happens. And I think that's what Charlie and I feel also.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about right there. And it's great when you can live off of your work like that, not just monetarily, but also helping out multiple generations like that. And with this project, it's really one of the many manifestations that is proof of that, which is awesome.
Yeah, even I never intended to write a book because of my college experience. And somebody came up to me one day and said, you ever think of writing a book? You could help more people than going all over lecturing. I said, no, I never thought of writing a book. I'm not a writer. And he talked to other people who talked to other people. And suddenly there were a group of people who were willing to help me write a book, editors and publishers and literary agents and all sorts and other writers. So what I did is like what I'm doing with you. I sat in front of a recorder and talked for hours and hours and hours because I knew I couldn't put it all down trying to type or writing it. I just talked for hours and then gave it to the editor writer, and he put it together to make chapters and created a book. But again, if that man hadn't walked up to me and said, have you ever thought of writing a book? It never would have happened. And I don't know, now it's up in the teens, whether it's 16, 17, 18, I don't even know how many books I've ended up putting together. But it's, again, just trying to help people and put the word out there because I can't get, I mean, now with things like Zoom and this program, you can get around the world. But when I was doing this, you had to travel. And we've been to a lot of countries and a lot of places. And the message was needed in all of them. Though I have to say that in some cultures and communities where people are more family-like, I mean, simple example here in the States, in Montana, they have better results for various diseases, survival rates and so forth, than they do in New York City. Now you'd say, what's the difference? It isn't that the New York medical care isn't good. It's the attitude towards each other. In Montana, you know everybody. When your car breaks down, the next car stops and says you need help. In New York, when your car breaks down, the police don't stop. They yell at you, I'll get help. And they go on. I know, I mean, this has happened to me. So you begin to realize that what your community is like, what your family is like, has a lot to do with your survival, whether it's a coronavirus, cancer, AIDS, or anything else. When you've got the love and the support, it makes a big difference.
Oh, yes, indeed. A huge difference indeed. Bigger than the state of Texas, probably.
And when you need help, ask for it. That is so important. Don't be submissive. See, the word patient is derived from submissive sufferer. A good patient doesn't complain, doesn't ask for anything, but they're not likely to survive. And that's why I made up the word respite. Be a responsible participant in your life. You need help, ask for it. You don't want to do something, say no. And that's part of what we're sharing in this. How do you make your life perfect? You know, it's an instruction book in poems, so it's easier to read.
Woohoo! Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, coming down the pike to the question that everybody gets to receive, and since one of you is kind of the 25, I have to modify it a bit. But if you were to wake up tomorrow and you're 21 again, but this time in 2020 with all of your amassed knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Charlie, you want to go first?
I would say to follow your heart and believe in what you want to do. That it was, like we talk about following your heart and doing what makes you happy, but that can be difficult when you gotta pay the bills still, and it can also be difficult if people around you are telling you to go another way. Like I've had, like, my mom and other close people are supportive of my work, and then I've had other people say, like, you can't make money writing books or taking pictures, go, be a lawyer or something. And can just believe in it and continue to follow what you want to do. And like, I worked as a waiter for years on the side of growing my photography business and stuff. So sometimes you got to do something on the side to support what you want to do, but you keep following your dreams, and it's important to stick to it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Follow your dream. The, the thing I've realized is that we're here to help one another. We're here to contribute to the world, but in our way, not by somebody else saying, I want you to be a lawyer, but what feels right within you as your way of contributing to the world. And I mean that. I mean, you could get, one of our kids, well, two of them, one who's a lawyer and an FBI agent, went to automotive and diesel school. And he was brilliant. I mean, his grades, everything, IQ was off the charts. And he said, I'm going to go to automotive and diesel school. I thought, oh, this brain, what's he going to do? Run a garage? But what he was into were modeling and creating. So cars interested him. Our front yard was always filled with cars that he was fixing and working on and so forth. And, then after automotive and diesel school, he goes to law school and on to, college and law school. And if he had been our oldest child instead of the third, I would have said to him, no, you're not going to automotive and diesel school. You got to go to college. You got to go to, graduate school. You got to have a job. But by the third kid, you're a hell of a lot smarter. You're going to go there. Okay, fine. Enjoy yourself. So off he went to Colorado. And our oldest son, I never forget him saying to me, how come they don't have to do what I had to do? And I said, it's because I realized a lot of things I made you do are not significant and not important. But it was me learning how to be a parent. So by the time you have 4 or 5, they have an easier life than number 1. You know, what his room looks like and how smart he is and what he's doing. And he's a wonderful, loving guy. But I never forget him saying that to me. And they all felt it. And so I'd say to everybody, live your authentic life. What you feel is right and appropriate for you to do as a way of contributing to the benefit of others and to loving others. So whether you're running an auto repair shop or a doctor, if everybody who comes in feels better and knows they're getting wonderful care and can rely on you, then you're doing a wonderful job and improving life. So to me, we have to figure out, how do I want to interact with people? What do I want to be the reason we get together? Do I want to coach a high school football team? Do I want to teach in a college? Do I want to sing and be on stage? All these things can be beautiful but difficult. Oh, I forgot one of the opera singers. My mother-in-law was an opera singer, and she was, I mean, she used to drive me crazy. I mean, one, because I sang so poorly, I wasn't allowed to sing in the house or the car. But she was into everything being so perfect, and I didn't understand why. It was like she was obsessive. What are you worrying about? You know, if strangers come over, if I bring some friends over, to, you know, coming over to date your daughter, why are you fixing everything? And then I heard it was a movie about the life of this opera singer, and I can't remember his name, but they said to him, what's it like to be on the stage? And he said, it's like death. And boy, that woke me up to my mother-in-law and to finally understanding her, not being critical, because what he was saying is, if he doesn't hit the right note, it's torture. You know, he's there in front of all these people singing, and he wants to do it exactly right. And that's the part that's sad. If you're going to get on the stage, get there to give them a gift. If it's not perfect, okay. They're going to forgive you. They're not perfect either. So just be comfortable with everybody. Because again, that's how I grew up in my house. And I don't mean my parents were messy, but they weren't worried if I brought friends over that the plates are on the right position on the table or the fork was on the right side of the plate. I mean, things that my mother-in-law would go nuts over when she set the table. But it was, we're here to be family with everybody. And I was a therapist for my mother-in-law because I embarrassed her so often. She finally began to enjoy me and laugh more. And I'll tell you, and I don't think it was a coincidence, I was at religious services and a cloud came into the room, into the synagogue. And it came over my head. And how big was it? Oh, about 2 or 3 feet long. And I heard my mother-in-law say, goodbye, Bernie. And I knew it was her spirit leaving, that she had just died. And I jumped up and ran down to the nursing home she was in a few miles away. When I walked in the door, the first nurse who saw me said, oh, you've heard. I said, I didn't hear. I've been told. My mother-in-law came to say goodbye. But the thing I laughed about was I often had lunch with her and would embarrass her, you know, in a fun way. And she died about 11:30. And I'm sure she looked at her watch and said, I'm not going to have lunch with him again. Let me get out of here now. And off she went. But those are the experiences I like to share to open people's minds. I'm not nuts. I'm not on drugs. I mean, I've had a near-death experience as a child, choking on a toy. I had a past life experience when somebody said to me over the phone, "Why are you living this life?" I went into a trance. Uh, I couldn't believe what I experienced. So, uh, oh, and as a baby, my grandmother, to quote my mother, pushed everything back where it belonged 4 or 5 times a day. Because it was very traumatic. My mother was very sick. It was a high forceps delivery. They had to pull me out. I was a battered mess. And that's the value of grandmothers and of love. See, this is what we ought to be for each other. Grandfathers and grandmothers. Grand, think of that word. Because she said, my grandmother poured oil all over me and pushed everything back where it belonged 4 and 5 times a day. And there are no photographs of anything but a covered carriage in the book in our family album. Because I was battered. I thought when I was a kid, I was sleeping, but nobody told me the true story until I grew up. But she saved my life. And 50 years later, when a woman massaged my shaved head, I became that infant again, the body memories. And it was an incredible experience. And when I opened my eyes, the room where I was being massaged had about 20 people in it. I said, "What the hell is everybody doing here? I'm getting a massage." And the therapist, who was the woman's husband, said, "We thought you had a heart attack or a stroke. We couldn't communicate with you. You were gone." And I explained to them I had become that child again, that infant. And all of us have those memories stored in us. I mean, I've had patients and they've written books about their experience. Um, you wake up from surgery and they say, "What would you like to drink?" "I'll have a beer and chicken McNuggets." That's a literal answer from somebody who wrote a book called The Change of Heart, Claire Sylvia. And she said, "Wait a minute, I never had those two things. What do I?" But she realized it was the donor in her talking to her. And he gave her his name and she found, and her friends did, they researched the New England area and found his obituary and called the family, and they confirmed everything that she had experienced with him. But those are things people need to understand. And again, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. So write the poems, read our poems, and let those things happen in you. So you have an authentic, genuine life, and with a purpose that you're here to contribute something. I found the word hispoditis in my 1996 diary. I didn't know what the hell it meant. I had to look it up again. And it's spending time with God in nature. And again, I think it's like the same connection I have with Charlie. He's into nature and the photography. When he's out there taking photographs, he's walking around with God, seeing how beautiful nature is. And his Bodhitas is about, like, every one of us should take an hour and go around in nature and keep.
That's a great point. There's a lot of times that like I do photography professionally, but it helps me to do it too. I've always taken pictures. Like I used to run around with one of those little one-time use cameras as a kid, but I started getting more into seeing the message and the meaning in it, that when I can capture something beautiful in nature, my goal with my work is for it to be like a window for people to see the healing beauty of nature's touch is what I call it. Through that window, that's my photography, to help them to connect with that and remember they're a part of that, and everybody's around them is a part of that. So we can love each other more. We can connect with the healing beauty of nature more. And then there's times when I'm just stressed out from life and everything. And there was a day like stress at work, and my mom sent me like, go out for half an hour and go down to those daffodils, and there were a couple other kinds of flowers, and just go do some pictures. And I had a lot of fun kneeling down with the flowers and doing macro photography, and I got some great stuff I was releasing after, and I just felt a lot better from going out and connecting like that. So it helps a lot to be out in nature like that.
Yeah. That's why I love his calendars. I want to go into business with him and start making them, because when I have it hanging over my desk where I'm doing my work, I just love looking up at it, you know, reading his message for the month and seeing the beautiful picture that's sitting in front of me with the flowers and the, you know, creatures and just nature. I've always seen nature as my teacher, more from accidental things that happen. But one was, we had innumerable pets. I always call this a Siegel zoo. We were always rescuing all kinds of creatures, and veterinarians were giving us creatures that nobody wanted. And it taught our kids really to value life. But I nailed all kinds of fencing up to trees around the property so we could keep the animals reasonably confined. And I noticed how the trees grew and took in the nails and the fences. They grew around them. And I don't know, maybe I'm a little nuts, but it became therapy for me. That if somebody sticks a nail in your side, are you capable of taking it in and growing around it and going on? Oh, and another time, a road was paved. We live on a circle. And I noticed the pavement cracking and a plant came up through it. And man, that impressed me. You're a seed. How do you know which way is up? You know, just the intelligence of life. And what keeps you going? You're running into a paved road. How the hell are you going to get out? And it busted through. So I brought the family down for a therapy session, tell them all to act like the plant. And one of our kids said, "What are you getting excited about? It's a skunk cabbage." You know, he needed a fancy plant, not just a skunk cabbage. But I said, it isn't what it is, it's what it's done. The intelligence, the willingness to keep going, keep pushing, don't quit. And look what happens. It's out in the sunlight. And that impressed me just about the nature of life and why I say how our mind affects our bodies. You know, what your mind is thinking, your body accepts as the truth. So if you're loving life, willing to keep pushing, you'll get to your goal someday. It's up to you to decide what you're willing to put up with and what I call the labor pains of life.
Oh, yeah, because someone has to give birth to something.
Right. Well, let me
Just
just say, when you said to something, because I've gotten poems from patients, and when the lady ended with, after 12 months of chemotherapy and radiation, I gave birth to myself. All the discomfort and pain was now justified. Because she compared it to the 9 months of pregnancy. That's the way her poem was. First about 9 months, then about 12 months. In one case, I gave birth to my child. In the second case, I gave birth to myself. And I think if we see our troubles as labor pains, then there's a, you know, a result to them. It's not just pain, because pain is important. You know, what makes life perfect? The fact that we have pain. If you didn't have pain, what would happen if you put your hand on a hot stove top? You wouldn't have a hand. But if it hurts, oh, you pull your hand right off. So we have to remember that pain is to protect us, not to suffer from, but to be used to protect us.
amen to that. Amen to that. Heck, I think that's the first time I actually heard that. Actually, so it's actually true. Pain is to protect us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, see, fear, even fear is good for you, but not when you imagine the fear. It's when it's real. I mean, if you're walking through the woods and you see some wild, crazy animal, you'll run away faster than you would have run if you weren't filled with fear because of the physiology, what it does to your brain, the circulation, the hormones, et cetera, in your body. So it empowers your body and your physical ability. But if you walk around thinking every shadow in the woods is some horrible animal that's going to attack me, then it tears your life to pieces, because fear is not a healthy thing to live in all the time. And that's why so many people suffer. they're living in fear of what's going to happen. When you grow up with love, you don't have unhealthy fear. And so your body senses that and isn't afraid of life.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about right there. My man is dropping a whole blanket of jewels tonight. Yes, indeed. The duo, the dynamic duo, baby. That's what I'm talking about. A whole blanket of wise gems, indeed. Yes,
Hey,
indeed.
Charlie, that should be our name, the dynamic duo.
Yeah. Nice.
I think that's a good one.
It is.
That's right. BC, the dynamic duo, Bernie and Charlie. That's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So, for those who want to pick up some magical copies of your co author goodness project, what's the best way, folks, to snag that magical book and your magical poetry and other wares?
So when you realize how perfect everything is available now on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anywhere you want to buy a book, or you can get it like shop small and get it from my mom's store. I can do autographed copies with you. Her website is wisdomoftheages.biz, biz. And I have my photography is if you look me up on Facebook or Charlie Siegel, author photographer. I'm on Instagram like that too. And you can find my grandfather on BernieSiegelMD.com. But you can find our book anywhere you'd like to buy a book when you realize how perfect everything is.
And yeah, and let me say, in this time, the bookstores may not be open. The Amazon is probably the simplest and best way. And my other book, which I have to say, to go from one to the next, is me and my mind.
No endings, only beginnings.
No endings, only beginnings. To realize to people that we're creating. You know why we talked about perfect. It's we can be creators. So there are no endings, only beginnings. And that relates to past lives and recycling. You can leave your body and start again. And you'll all find out the truth. That's why we put these things in books, whether it's in poems or in stories. It's the truth. I don't write about what I don't experience. That's why lots of patients in the hospital would call me and say, can you come over to talk to me? All the other doctors and nurses think I'm crazy. And they would tell me all these mystical things, and including a woman who was a mystic and started bringing me messages from dead patients. And she's still a friend of mine. And my wife died 2 years ago. And she brought me, I had mentioned to you, my mother-in-law is an opera singer. Well, my wife dies on Friday. On Sunday, the phone rings. Monica is there. She says, Bobby's back with her family. Everything is okay. A lovely woman who was an opera singer got in touch with me to let me know everything's okay. Now, how is Monica going to come up with that statement? You can't deny this. She didn't know my family. She isn't a neighbor. She didn't even know my wife died. And yet she calls me on the phone and says those words. So that's why my mind is open to the craziness of life and creation. And I would just say to everybody, participate in creation. Be a co-creator. Be God's right arm. Oh, and I'll give them a clue, because anybody listening, this will make it worthwhile. When you get to heaven, there's an admission line. When you get to the head of the line, they say, how do you want to be introduced to God? Oh, I'm a fan of Dr. Siegel's. Come back when you know who you are. I'm a New York lawyer. Come back when you know who you are. I'm a child of God. Come on in. So remember, when you get there, tell them Bernie told you that the right answer is, and they'll get a kick out of me, because I go there often as part of the board of directors. And I'll tell you, part of the problem in heaven that drove me crazy, Charlie has heard me say this, is everybody loves everybody. So the traffic is horrendous, because everybody's yelling, you go first, I love you. No, you go first, I love you. So nobody goes anywhere when you get to a corner. They're all loving everybody and telling everybody to go. So I don't drive in heaven, I walk around now. But try it on earth. I've had fun doing that, pulling up to a corner with another car and saying, "Go ahead." And they said, "No, no, you first. You go ahead." "No, no, I love you. You go ahead." And I bust out laughing because I keep saying to them, "This is what it's like in heaven." And then you make friends with the other occupants of the car. They're not mad at you for delaying things. They're laughing because of what you're sharing.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, folks. That's what I'm talking about. So for those still listening, pick up the wonderful books, is all the books. Heck, my man Dr. Bernie's got 19 of them. I guess 20 now, so pick up all 20 if you like. Make that decade an awesome decade indeed. So any parting words for the folks still listening from the dynamic duo?
Thanks for having us. It's been nice talking with you. And I released my first book in 2017, and this is my second, and I'm working on my next. So that maybe we'll talk again sometime. And we want to get to help people to live the most positive lives they can. And the whole idea is spreading light and uplifting everybody. And it's a great time to do that when there's challenge around us, especially right now. It's a great time we can all focus on spreading light and uplifting each other.
Yeah, I just thought of something I want to share with people that you mentioned because you were talking about listening to us. Helen Keller has been my teacher. Her book, My Religion, is a wonderful book to read. It's her religion, if you know what I mean. But she had a question. And she had a statement. I turned it into a question. I'd say to people, you have to be either blind or deaf tomorrow morning. Which do you want to be when you wake up tomorrow morning? And except for musicians, almost everybody picks deafness. But here's Helen Keller's quote, and it taught me a lot about life and helping people. I've heard of the stars, of the rainbows, of the play of light on the waves. These I would like to see, but far more than sight, I wish for my ears to be open. The imaginations of Mozart, I forgot, and it's, voices, but deafness is darker by far than blindness. And she's basically saying that life without hearing is darker by far than blindness. And I'd say to people, you want to help others, listen to them so they finally hear themselves. Good therapists know that, and I learned it as a doctor. When people came in and I couldn't cure everything and all they're doing is, ranting and raving and complaining, and I would just go, At the end of hour or two, they would say to me, thank you, you've been very helpful. And I haven't said anything except because they heard themselves and then they knew what they needed to do. And I think that's why our poetry, your journaling, learn who you are, learn about yourself. Then you'll know what to do with your life. You don't have to get therapy because you've brought it all out from within you by writing poems, by talking to somebody who'd listen and not interrupt you and say, oh, what you need to do is, that's not who you want to talk to. You want to talk to somebody who says, that's interesting. Yes, fine, go ahead. And listens to you. And you'll hear and know yourself.
Hey there, buddy. Looks like you made it to the end of this episode. Since you made it to the end of this episode, do both of us a favor and stop being greedy. Stop it right now and share this episode with your friends and your fellow podcast lovers.